Men of Ryloth, the time has come to free ourselves!
The Star Wars universe is quite rich and diverse, and it has introduced us to several fascinating alien species over time. Some of these species easily stand out as compared to others, and the Twi'lek are one such iconic species that are easily recognized in the franchise. While they have only ever appeared as background characters, they have left quite an impressive mark on the audience due to their distinct appearance. Some Twi'leks, such as Mission Vow, Hera Syndulla, and Ayla Secura, have especially become fan favorites in no time. Besides having unique physiological features such as distinct skin colors and headtails, the Twi'lek also have a diverse culture. Today we will explore the anatomy and the cultural aspects of these colorful species and tell you all about the Twi'lek. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Everyone to liberate the entire planet. You inspired me. The rebellion is no different.
Who are the Twi'lek species? The Twi'leks were essentially a humanoid species that originated from the outer rim territories of the planet of Ryloth. They were sometimes even called Rylothians or even tailheads, and they had noticeably long appendages that protruded from their skulls and appeared as tails. These tail-like appendages were known as lekus, and they were their most striking features. Twi'leks were one of the most common species in the Star Wars universe, and they often blended with the crowds and even worked as undercover agents during wars. Twi'leks suffered under the tyrannical rule of the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the events of the Clone Wars, and they later created a resistance movement in order to fight them. Led by Cham Syndulla, the Twi'lek resistance later gained the support of the Galactic Republic, and they then worked alongside the Jedi Order to get rid of the Separatists. Over time, the Clone Wars ended, and Ryloth was then annexed by the Empire. During this time, the Twi'leks lived under Imperial rule, and they eventually did start the Free Ryloth movement to overthrow the Empire's rule. Over time, the Twi'leks have been a part of several movements and uprisings in order to protect their planet. They also have a long history with slavery, and female Twi'leks were often forced into working as slaves for the affluent and wealthy. The headtails of the species have a purpose. The headtails of these species are undoubtedly one of their most defining features, and these appendages also help others in identifying them. Also called leku, these headtails stem from the back of their heads, and some of the Twi'leks even decorate them and style them in a similar manner as human hair. However, these headtails are not just a part of their physical appearance that is used to recognize them. They also serve a purpose. These tails were used by the Twi'lek in order to communicate with each other and their language. Twi'leki was also made up of spoken words as well as leku-based gestures. In this way, they would cross their headtails in different ways in order to share their thoughts and feelings with each other. Some of these simple gestures included crossing their tails together to show affection and pointing the headtails towards the speaker to insult them. In a similar way, they would cross their leku twice in order to say "I love you." While this was their general way of communicating with each other, more powerful and wealthy Twi'leks had an even more elaborate way of using their leku to establish their status in society. While most Twi'leks had 2 headtails, some of them even had as many as 4 headtails. These lekus were also quite important to their overall well-being, and any damage caused to their headtails could have detrimental effects on their health. Some Twi'leks had sensitive headtails that would react to the slightest touch and even reach out and grab objects. Understanding some of the other unique features of their biology. Twi'leks were essentially humanoids, and they shared several physical characteristics with humans. They had arms, legs, as well as regular facial features such as eyes, noses, and a mouth. However, there was some difference in the ears of the male and the female Twi'leks, wherein men had regular ears while women had ear cones. They also had teeth in their mouth, but their teeth were notably blunt, and Twi'lek men would often sharpen them on their own. It was also discovered that these creatures had a higher body temperature than most humanoids. Twi'leks also did not have any body hair with the exception of their eyelashes, and it was theorized that they had eyelashes in order to protect their eyes from the sandstorm dust on Ryloth. While Twi'leks did not have any eyebrows, Twi'lek females would often paint fake eyebrows or even get them tattooed in order to appear physically attractive to humans. Some mutations also led to a few Twi'leks to grow body hair, and these creatures came in several shapes, sizes, and colors. Some Twi'leks, especially the females, were tall and thin, while other ones were stout and even obese. In terms of their skin color, Twi'lek skin had many variations, to the point where each Twi'lek looked unique in their own way. Their skin colors ranged from colors such as white, orange, yellow, blue, purple, grey, and so on, but some colors were more common than others. For instance, one subspecies of the Twi'lek had red skin, and they were also known as Lethans. They were considered to be quite rare, while on the other hand, there was a common Twi'lek species known as Rutians that had blue skin. Over time, some variations of Twi'leks were also artificially created, and they later blended in with the rest. Some Twi'leks underwent genetic mutation over time, and these species were genetically related to the Yeveta species. What is the secret behind their versatile diet and appetite? While Twi'leks usually maintain their figure and seem fit and thin, they actually have a huge appetite and are known for eating a lot more than one might expect. They grew up in the harsh environment of Ryloth, and they even evolved to be able to consume a wide variety of things. Their versatile diet made it easy for them to source enough food to satiate their huge appetite, and they even had multiple stomachs in order to digest all the food that they consumed. Since they had multiple stomachs, even the younger Twi'leks could eat a huge amount of food. Moreover, obesity was seen as a sign of wealth and power among the Twi'leks, and it was more commonly seen among the high-class Twi'lek society. Exploring the society and culture of the species. The Twi'leks had an enriched culture and a language of their own called the Twi'leki. Their language could not be fully understood by other beings as they incorporated the use of their leku or HeadTails in order to speak with each other. Sometimes they could even communicate in complete silence with the help of their head-tail gestures and avoid the use of any spoken words altogether. They were also able to speak the Galactic Basic Standard, which was the most basic language used by species all over the universe. However, they had quite a noticeable accent while speaking it, and only a few Twi'leks had mastered this language without any accent. For instance, Hera Syndulla had managed to lose the accent after being away from Ryloth for quite a long period of time. It was later noticed that her Twi'leki accent did resurface during a conversation with her father. Sometimes the Twi'leks also consciously made use of their Twi'leki accent while speaking in Galactic Basic Standard during their time as slaves, and Hera had done this on one occasion when she tried to disguise herself as a slave. The Twi'leks had first entered the Galactic Society after the medicinal and recreational values of the mineral reel were uncovered, and they even realized that their species could not fare well in space at this time. They had limited control over their position in the universe, and this enabled the Hutts to soon take control over them and seize their mining production. This later gave way to their slave trade practices and resulted in a sad history for this species. The Twi'lek society was also initially based on an ancestral structure that included several clans, and they did not have any central government power as such. In order to establish some order in their society, each city would be under the rule of a head clan that consisted of 5 Twi'lek males. This lead clan would then rule over the city until a member of the clan died, and at this point the Twi'leks decided that it was time for a new generation to take over. The remaining 4 Twi'lek males would then hand over their leadership roles to their descendants, but there was a lot of tension every time this process happened in Twi'lek society. At this point, these 4 members had to take exile in the Bright Lands, and they often resorted to using cunning ways to evade exile. These head clans asserted their power and influence over everyone in their city, and they kept their power within their bloodlines. All the head clans in Twi'lek society on Ryloth would also form an alliance with each other, which meant that they had total authority over the rest of the society. This clan clan system had created castes within their society, and the Twi'leks born at the bottom of a bloodline were classified as low birth caste and even subjected to slavery. However, lower caste members did have the option to leave Ryloth and create a life for themselves outside of Twi'lek culture. Twi'leks were quite analytical and business-minded, and they could fare well on their own by working in politics, management, or even running crime syndicates outside of Ryloth. While Twi'lek leaders typically seemed horrified at the mere accusation of engaging in the slave trade, they did practice slavery to the point where Twi'leks had gained a reputation for being synonymous with slaves all over the galaxy. Many Twi'leks were even born into slavery or even sold off at a young age, and it was an unfortunate but prevalent part of their culture. Just like any other society, the Twi'lek society also had disparities between the wealthy and the poor. Obesity was seen as a sign of wealth, and the wealthier class of people also had elaborate ways of communicating with their HeadTails. The Twi'leks had special dishes that were a part of their culture, and they typically made these dishes from creatures known as Minocs. Minocs were a bat-like parasite species, and the Twi'lek consumed them and made spicy dishes such as fried Minocs, Minoc Cloud City, and Minoc Coronat City. On the other hand, predatory species such as the Gutkurs preyed on the Twi'leks and used their sharp claws to attack them and then feed on them. Twi'leks were also known as cunning and manipulative creatures, and they refrained from confrontation and used sneaky ways to get what they wanted. They would often use their charisma to convince others, and they were known for hiding away in the shadows during major conflicts in order to keep themselves safe. What is with their unfortunate history with slavery? As we have explored earlier, Twi'leks have had a long and unfortunate history with slavery, and they were found in huge numbers all over the Star Wars universe. Various factions ranging from the Hutts and the Separatists to the Empire had made use of slaves at some point, and they all traded with the Twi'leks. The Hutts were especially known for their history with slaves, and they dominated the entire slave trading scene. The Old Republic also turned a blind eye to their actions, and the Hutts often traded young, attractive women and objectified them. They even enslaved the Twi'lek females for this purpose, while the males were used for labor purposes. Even before gaining a reputation as slaves in the universe, the Twi'leks were enslaved by the Rakatan Infinite Empire before they created a movement to overthrow them. Twi'leks were exploited by others because they were unable to establish themselves on their own, and they relied on other species to get their hands on technology. They were unable to travel across space on their own, and they eventually became the targets of other species who realized that the Twi'leks could be easily exploited. These alien species then offered to trade their technology and resources in exchange for the Twi'lek women, who were considered to be quite attractive. They also realized that the Twi'lek species could interbreed with other species, and this soon gave way to massive slave operations on Ryloth. Twi'lek families would then sell off the women in their families to these alien visitors in order to earn credits, while some Twi'lek males would also willingly enter the slave trade in order to get some wages. While these slave agreements were contractual, these Twi'leks did not have sufficient wages to break their contract, and they were practically bound to serve their masters for their entire lives. Many Twi'lek ended up sacrificing their entire life and youth to this slave practice, and the clan leaders also did nothing to put an end to this. In fact, these clan leaders tried to justify slavery by stating that these slaves had a better life in a high-tech world than what they had left behind on Ryloth. The nonchalant attitude of the clan leaders eventually worsened the slavery problem as the Twi'lek started raiding villages to collect more people who would be subjected to the same fate as countless other slaves. How do Twi'leks reproduce? The Twi'leks reproduced in a similar manner as humans, and Twi'lek mothers typically had a gestation period of about 11 months. They could also give birth to as many as 5 children at once, and they could interbreed with other species. Usually, Twi'leks would breed with humans to create a hybrid species, and a great example of this is Hera Syndulla, who had a son with Kanan Jarrus. While the child appeared mostly human and inherited most most of Canaan's characteristics, he also gained Hera's green pigment in his hair and ears. Twi'leks took around 12 years to reach adolescence, and just like humans, they reached physical maturity during their teen years. They typically matured by the time they were 18, and these creatures were also known for living as long as 100 years. Conclusion. To sum it up, the Twi'lek was certainly quite an interesting species that left behind an impressive mark in the Star Wars universe. Their HeadTails especially made them stand out, and they also have a lot of diverse physiological features. The Twi'lek society had an enriched culture despite having faced many struggles with slavery and tyranny, and they are truly fascinating creatures. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.